Good morning, welcome back to my channel. I'm Bree. If you're new here, I make bookish content like reading vlogs and other book recommendation videos. So today's video I'm going to do 22 books I plan to read in 2022. I typically read about 50 books a year. I've been doing about 45 to 50. So I don't feel like this is too crazy. I have my stack of books down here, and actually I think all of the books on my list are books that are already out. They're not including any releases for 2022. It's just books that I've had on my shelves or on my TBR that I've wanted to read and get to. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So the first category I'm going to start with is romances. I actually don't have either of these two books, so I'm just going to pop it up here on the screen. So the first one is Beach Read by Emily Henry. I've heard a lot of people talk about this. I think it came out in 2020, but it's basically these two writers. One is a romance writer and one's a literary fiction writer. They suffer from writer's block, and so they both go, I think, on this trip away to try to fix that writer's block, and I don't know if they decide to swap stories, and then ultimately while they're there they fall in love, and it's just a cute little romance about writers, and I think it sounds right up my alley. I've had it on my want to read for a while, but I just don't gravitate towards buying romance or reading romance, and so I just haven't got to it. But it's just something I want to get to because I think that having some romance in between heavier books like horror and adult fantasy and things like that would be really good for me, and I like to do some middle grade in there too, but having something different if I'm not in the middle grade mood. So the next book is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. And I've had this on my TBR for a long time, and I just haven't read it. I know there's, I think, 3 out, and I think that I would really enjoy it. I think this one has some chronic illness representation, which I don't know if it would be hard for me to read or not, but I also think it could be really helpful to read. So I like that her books have more going on in them than just a romance. So basically, Chloe Brown is a computer geek, and she's chronically ill, and I think she moves out of her family's house to just explore the world more and see more out there. And then I think she ends up meeting a tattoo artist who also is an artist by day, painting, I think, and he kind of maybe shows her around, and then they end up falling in love. And I've just heard really good things, so I'm really excited to pick that up, and it's one that I think I'm really gonna like. So those are my 2 romances for the year. Kind of leaving myself open, because if I decide it's not for me, I don't want to go out and buy a bunch of romances that I don't know I'll like. The next list I'm going to go to is middle grade, and I have 2 of them on my list. So the first one is Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow, and she basically is the unluckiest girl based on when she was born, and so the whole town kind of blames her for all their problems, thinking that she's cursed basically. She's supposed to die at midnight on her 11th birthday. And when that time comes, she's kind of swept away to these trials that she then is competing with other children to get into this organization, this wondrous society. And I've heard it's a really good middle grade that kind of reminds people of Harry Potter, but I've heard it's done maybe even better. And it's a series, so I think there's 3 out, I'm not sure. But this by Jessica Townsend. And I've just heard so many amazing things by everyone who read it. When I was buying it, the lady at the counter told me that it was a really good book and she really liked it, and I've heard really good reviews from people who read middle grade. I am really excited to read this. This again has been on my TBR for a while, and I just hadn't picked it up. The next book has been on my TBR for I think maybe the longest time, and it just sounds so cute, so whimsical, and that is The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making by Catherine M. Valente. This, for some reason, reminds me a lot of We Free Men by Terry Pratchett, which is a Tiffany Aching novel. And it's just one of those middle grades that I think is just going to be so full of whimsy, and you just kind of get swept up in a adventure, and teaches you things along the way, but it's just so fun. So this is about September, and she longs for adventure when she's invited to fairyland by a green wind and a leopard. And so she accepts, and guess fairyland is in turmoil, and so this sets her on an adventure. And there's 2 more books, I believe. Yeah, 2 more books. And it just seems like the cutest little book that I'm just gonna really love. I'm super excited to pick this up. I could see myself reading the whole series. I really also want to continue the Terry Pratchett ones, but this is just one that I think is going to be right up my alley. So those are my 2 middle grade. Now I think I'm going to move on to YA fantasy. So I have 1 book with me and 2 I don't own. So let me start with the one I do own. That is We Free the Stars by Hafsa Faizal. And I just finished We Hunt the Flame, and I gave it, I think, 3.75 stars. I really enjoyed it. I just think there were some things that could have been better done. And it's her first book. It's a debut novel, so I'm not saying anything bad about it. And I didn't realize that it's a duology and that this one had come out. I'm really bad about waiting a long time to finish series, and so when I saw this, I picked it up, and I really want to finish it this year because I don't want to forget what happened in the first one. I really like duologies because they don't take me as long, because it's just 2 books. We Hunt the Flames is basically, she describes it as Hunger Games meets Lord of the Rings. So a Prince of Death, he goes on a quest for this lost item. His father wants him to destroy it, so he's on a quest to destroy it and kill whoever's in the way. And then this huntress, who is disguising herself as a hunter because women in this area aren't allowed to do much at all, and so she disguises herself as a man and then ends up being like the best hunter, and so she's asked to go on this quest to get this book back to help release magic. So they're kind of against each other. This will expand on that. I have high hopes for this one, that it'll be better than the first, and that it will focus more on the magic system, because I felt like I wanted more of that from the first one. But I really did like it, and I love her world building. I think she does a really good job of building like a very vivid world. You know, she describes like there's like different areas, so like I think like 6 or 7 different areas, and each one she kind of describes them, but she does it through like food and what spices they use and all these things that really makes them feel like a real place, and that I really appreciated. So I'm really excited to pick this one up. I think I want to pick this up early in the year just so I don't forget anything. So the next book I want to read is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn, and this is, I think, more of an urban fantasy, and basically the main character, her mother dies, and then years later she's going to college, and this event happens that I think she may be attacked by a demon or something, and someone tries to erase her memory so that she won't remember, but it doesn't work, and she realizes she has magical powers, which then leads her into this whole kind of adventure, and it is a Arthur retelling, so I think there's like Merlin and all those things with it throughout the story. So I think it's like Arthur come back to life kind of tale or things like that. But I love Arthurian literature. In college, I had most of my classes were in medieval literature, and I focused a lot on Arthur, King Arthur tales, and so it's something that whenever I see a retelling of it, I just want to pick it up because I love Arthurian retellings. And so this one just seems right up my alley. I've also heard really good reviews of Legendborn, and it's the first in a series, so if I like it, there's going to be more to come. So this one is one that just came out in November, but I've seen it a lot on BookTube, and I immediately put it on my TBR, and I really want to read it, and I want to get it because it just sounds so great. So that's Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowen. This one is a YA fantasy that is described as a Children of Blood and Bone meets Little Mermaid. And basically it's this mermaid who takes the souls of the dead in the sea to the god of the dead. Basically she transports them, and I think one day she doesn't, she ends up saving the person, and so then she has to pay the price for the consequences of that. I have always loved mermaid things. My sister loves mermaids more than me, but because she's always loved them, it's always been stories we've consumed when we were younger, and so I still have a place in my heart for mermaids, and I think this would be a really cool take on it. And it's also said it's inspired by West African mythology, so I think all those things are a combination for me to really like it. The cover is stunning. I am excited to pick it up. I have heard good things so far, and I don't know what else to say besides I'm really excited to pick it up, and I think that it'll be a really interesting story. So that's all for my YA fantasy. I think I'm going to move on to adult fantasy now, which adult fantasy is one of my bigger lists for the year because I've focused a lot on YA fantasy in the past. These past couple years I've been more and more reading adult fantasy, so I feel like there's a lot I'm behind on, and new stuff's coming out all the time. So I'm trying to kind of read the stuff that's been on my TBR for a while. So I'll start with the one I don't have, which is it's Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. So Assassin's Apprentice is one that I've had on my list for a while, and I've heard just such good things, and it's part of the Farseer trilogy, but then within that there's World. I believe there's at least 2 other trilogies that Robin Hobb has wrote, maybe even more than that. So it's a lot that I could get to, and I've just heard great things about Robin Hobb, so it's one that I definitely want to pick up. So this follows our main character Fitz, and he is a royal bastard, and he possesses like a magic, I think, that works with animals. I'm not exactly sure, but he gets cast out for being, I think, a bastard and maybe having those powers. And he eventually comes back and is brought back into the royal family, and then he is trained to be an assassin. I think it goes further than that throughout the stories, but I think the way it's described is that the first book he's a young boy, but I think the next couple books after that he's older, like he's grown up, or in this one he's growing up through the book. So, but I don't know where the story's gonna go. I just think it sounds so good, and there are other books in the world that I think sound so interesting, so I want to read this so that I can also read those other books. Okay, so the next book is Jade City by Fonda Lee, and this is basically rival gangs, I guess, if you want to say. They control Jade. Jade basically enhances their magical abilities, and so people want this, so it's a commodity that is fought over, and I believe the family who is at the top right now ends up having to fight for the Jade, and it says that the fragile peace between the clans is about to break. And this is described as an epic drama reminiscent of the best classic Hong Kong gangster films, but takes place in a fantasy metropolis so gritty and well imagined that you'll forget you're reading a book. It sounds so interesting to me. I love the idea of different clans fighting each other for a commodity, and then having that magic in there is really intriguing to me. I really liked The Lies of Locke Lamora, which had a lot of that going on as well. I think it just makes for really interesting politics in a fantasy book, and so I think this one will be really good. It's pretty big. I believe it's a trilogy, so I think that's my perfect kind of length, is a trilogy. The next one is one that a lot of people have talked about as well, and that I've just been late to the train on, and I think it's because I'm a little intimidated. So that's The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I don't know why that was so hard for me. So I honestly don't know a lot about this, except for that the earth is used as a weapon, it says. Yeah, where the power of the earth is wielded as a weapon. A lot of people really like N.K. Jemisin and loves what she does with her books, and I've heard they're kind of like, out there is not the right word, but just very different than a lot of adult fantasy. Like, it goes in some wild directions. I really want to try it because I just want to branch out of my kind of bubble that I've been reading in. I've just heard her writing's really amazing, that she creates a really great and interesting world, and so it's one I want to pick up. And I don't know much about it, but I kind of want to keep it that way because I'm already intimidated, so if I learn more about it, I'm just going to get more intimidated. And again, I think this is a trilogy. So yeah, I'm definitely going to pick this up soon, and I'm excited to read it. So the next one is one that I think some people will be surprised I haven't read it yet, because it is a very beloved series, and one that I'm excited to try, but it's long. So it's The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, and Brandon Sanderson finished the last couple books after Robert Jordan passed away. The thing that is intimidating about this series is not only the length, but it's 14 books. And as I've said before, I don't do the best. I just finished Throne of Glass, which is a YA series, and that was 7 books, and that took me a long time, and I was like ready to be done. So I don't know how this will go, but I've heard just such good things. And we started watching the TV series because my fiance Noah has read the first 2 books, and I haven't read them at all. But I like the TV show, and I like what this is doing, so I'm excited to pick it up, and I think I could really like it. It's just intimidating. So this follows, I think, a couple point of views, but I believe there's supposed to be 4 or 5 that could be the Dragon Reborn, which could either save the world or help the darkness end it. And so they're on this quest to figure out who the dragon is out of them, and basically stop the darkness. And there's this whole concept of time and the Wheel of Time. Again, I don't know much about it except for it's like an epic quest fantasy, and I really love Lord of the Rings, and I love Stormlight Archives and things like that. So I feel like this is one that is right up my alley. I just think the size of the books and the size of the series is intimidating to me. So the last one on my list is, the last one on my adult fantasy list is The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. And this follows a con artist in Cairo. Yep, 18th century Cairo. And she is unsurpassed in her skill. She's the best con artist out there. And she ends up, during one of her cons, summoning a Jinn warrior. And that leads them on a whole adventure because now people are out to get her, and I think out to get him. That leads them on this huge quest that ends up diving into a whole world of politics, I believe. Yeah, her very presence threatens to ignite a war that has been simmering for centuries. So this, again, is an adult fantasy, and it's a pretty big one, and it's a trilogy. And I think all 3 are out by now. Sorry, I got cut off. I've actually had this on my TBR for a while. Like, I bought this, I think, 2 years ago, and I just haven't picked it up because of the size. And this is going to be the year of just picking up the big books and reading them. I think partly because I was reading through the Stormlight Archives, that any other big adult book I just wasn't ready for, because mentally I just needed to like soak in all of what was happening in the Stormlight Archives. So I think this year I'm ready to dive into other worlds. This one and Jade City are probably the highest on my list of adult fantasy that I want to read. Okay, so I'm going to move on to horror. Horror is a new genre to me this year. I've only read 1 book so far, but I really think it is something that I'm going to like. So the book I read this year was The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, and he has another book out that's called My Heart is a Chainsaw that just came out in 2021, and I really want to pick it up. It looks like it's going to be a series because there is another one planned to come out. This is basically about a girl who watches a lot of horror films, and then I believe she like kind of characterizes people in her head of horror films, and she ends up realizing that people start dying or that things start happening that make her believe that a horror film is like being acted out in her town. And so she's trying to figure out what's happening, and I think it has a lot of references to different like horror films, which I don't know if I should start watching horror films. I think I'm actually worse with horror films than maybe I will be with horror books. Something about seeing them, they just replay in my head. And so I'm wondering if this book will go over my head just because I don't have those references as much, because I just don't watch horror. But maybe I'll watch a few. We'll see. But I just find the concept so cool, and I love those kind of like spoofy kind of things, which I think this isn't supposed to be real spoofy, but like I love when books comment on those things, like comment on typical horror books or horror films, or you know, kind of make fun of those things. I'm open to trying this one because I don't think it'll be as pop out scary as I thought it was going to be, and I just like think that would be a good another intro into the genre. Okay, so speaking of like kind of spoofy type books, the next one I want to read is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. And this is basically a mom who doesn't feel fulfilled. She feels like she just does everything for everyone else. And the only thing that brings her joy is this book club where they read like murder mysteries and stuff like that. She starts to believe that there are vampires in her town, and I think it's these moms going up against some vampires. I just think the concept of stay-at-home moms going up against vampires just sounds great. He like wrote it in about his mom. With this book, I wanted to pit a man freed from all responsibilities but his appetites against women whose lives are shaped by their endless responsibilities. I wanted to pit Dracula against my mom. As you'll see, it's not a fair fight. And I just find that really adorable, but also like sounds like the best premise for a book. I've heard that for some people this didn't live up to the hype. So I'm hoping it does for me, and I'm new to the genre, so I think I might find it more interesting than maybe people who are well versed in the genre, just because I don't have much to compare it to. But I've heard really good things about Grady Hendrix. I know that he's a very well-known author in the genre, so I don't think it's going to be terrible. And I haven't heard like terrible reviews, more just like a 3.5 stars. Hold on, my cat is going crazy. Okay, so the last horror book I have, which I was actually surprised to find out it was horror, and I've had this on my TBR for a long time, but I guess I just thought it was fantasy. But that is The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. And basically her mom was found to be consorting with witches, and also it sounds like her mom married an outsider of a different race, and so that kind of cast her out of society a little bit. The main character, she ends up like figuring out more about her mom, and I think it like dives her into this world of witches, which are blasphemous in the church, and it like leads her to learn a lot about the church and the things happening there, and just this idea of witches versus the church. I think it's going to be a very like dark, haunting kind of book, and I'm really into that. I think even just as thinking of this as like more of a fantasy, I was really interested. Kaladin, no thank you. So I'm excited to read it as a horror too. Okay, my last section is mystery thriller. Now the first one I'm going to talk about is actually more YA mystery thriller, but I didn't have any other books, so I didn't know what other category to put it in, so I'm just going to put it here. That is As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson, and this is the third book in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. And A Good Girl's Guide to Murder follows Pippa, and she is in high school, and she ends up doing her senior capstone project on a murder that happened in her town where a girl went missing, and then her boyfriend ends up killing himself, and it is believed that he killed his girlfriend and then killed himself. And the police kind of view it as like a done, solved case, but Pippa thinks there's more to it than that, and so she ends up teaming up with the brother of the suspect that was believed to have killed Andy Bell, and it leads her into this whole mystery of what happened to Andy Bell. She ends up solving the mystery of what happened, and it unravels a lot of secrets in her town. I really enjoyed the first book because I feel like it really made Pippa to be a well-rounded character, and same with the other characters like Ravi, her sidekick. And I think that it dealt with grief really well, and what happens when your like sibling is made out to be this terrible person, so like believed to kill his girlfriend, and then how that affects the family and how that affects the how the community sees the family. It reminds me a lot of Nancy Drew, but a better Nancy Drew, and that's why I like it, because I used to read a lot of Nancy Drew growing up. So also going forward, I don't know a ton about the books that I have on my TBR because I like to keep my mystery thrillers a little bit mysterious for me, because I think I have a better time when I don't know too much of the plot going in. And so this next book is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, and I believe it is a group that did Shakespeare plays, and this is like 10 years later or something when one of the guys gets out of jail for a murder that happened during this Shakespeare play, and he comes to tell the real story of what happened. And I think it'll be really interesting. I studied Shakespeare in school for my degree, and so I think that side of things will be really interesting to see, and I just find it to be such an interesting setting for a murder mystery. So this next one is more of a detective mystery, and I read the first one this year and I really liked it, and it's part of the Lady Sherlock series. So this one is A Conspiracy in Belgravia by Sherry Thomas. The first one is called A Study in Scarlet Women, and this is basically if Sherlock Holmes was actually a woman. So she is part of this family, and she has 3 sisters, and she isn't allowed to do anything that's not what a typical lady would do. But she's super smart, and she has these talents for picking up on things that others don't. And so she ends up pretending to be Sherlock Holmes. So she ends up communicating with this detective and helping solve some mysteries, and she ultimately leaves home and is trying to find her way in the world because she doesn't want to be confined to a life of a woman in this time. And so it's about basically if Sherlock Holmes was a woman and no one knows that it's a woman. And I really liked that concept, and I thought it was well done. So these are just like fun detective novels for me. I really like detective mysteries because they're not as dark and grim as the other ones, so they're just kind of more fun, and I like trying to figure out who did it or picking up on the red herrings and the clues along the way. So The next one is The Perfect Stranger by Megan Miranda. And I picked up my first Megan Miranda this year, and that was All the Missing Girls by Megan Miranda. And so I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fast, good mystery thriller. And so I picked this one up, and I want to get to it this year. So this is The Perfect Stranger, and it follows two friends that go to a new town, and I believe one of the friends ends up disappearing, and the main character finds out she doesn't know as much about her friend as she thought she did. And this town is looking at her as if she's the main suspect. And they're just kind of suspicious of these two girls. And so I think it's just unraveling what happened to her friend and who her friend really was and how she doesn't know that much about her. I like the missing friend dynamic. I think that she did that similarly in All the Missing Girls, and I think it was done really well. So I'm interested to see how this one goes. So the final book is one that has been all over BookTube, I believe, but it sounds really good, is In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. I definitely want to read this year. I wanted to read it this month. It was on my December TBR. But I just was like reading a lot of dark stuff, and I'm in the mood for something a little lighter and fluffier. So I am putting this off till 2022. I believe this follows a group of people who have a friend go missing, and then years later it kind of comes out through a text message, I believe, is sent that's gonna reveal what happened, and you end up like trying to figure out which of these friends maybe killed their friend. Again, I don't know too much about it, and I want to keep it that way, but I'm really intrigued by this cover, and it says it's an addictive and riveting psychological thriller, which sounds right up my alley. I like the dynamic of a group of people, and there's this secret, and it has to come out. I think that it's always interesting to see like what people are hiding in these books, and so that's, I think, what draws me to them. So I think this is gonna be a read that I will really enjoy. Okay, so that's all the books I have. If you're new here, I'd love if you subscribe, and if you want to leave a comment of if you read any of these books or what books you're looking forward to, I'd love to hear about it. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I hope this video wasn't too long, but I'm excited to get to all these books. I feel like 2022 is going to be my reading year. I just have a good feeling about it. So yeah, thank you for watching. Until next time.